Good morning. Morning. How are you all today?
Great.
Should I just quit right now? What's the deal? Are y'all okay today?
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Hey, when I was 14 years old, my family went on a vacation. Now, that wasn't something we normally did. We were poor. We never went anywhere. And we didn't go anyplace really fun, but we lived in northwest Oklahoma, and we were going to Falls Creek. Falls Creek wasn't open at that time. It was either early in the spring or late in the summer. I can't remember which it was. But we were going to Falls Creek, and we were meeting some people there. The Baggetts were going to be there, and some other family was going to be there. We're going to spend 2 nights at Falls Creek. We've been apart for 2 or 3 years, and we're just getting together and going to have fun. And so we went. First day, first night went really well. We had a great time. Second day, it's the morning sometime, and we had a ping pong table up on the second floor. And the rules were that you had to wait in line to play at the ping pong table, and if you won, you got to stay at the table, and whoever else was next in line got to play you. I finally got up there, I finally won, and so the next game, they were coming to play me. And I think it was Mitch or Monty, I can't remember who it was, but they were going to come and play me. But in the meantime, my little brother, who was 5 years younger than me, around 9 years old, he grabbed the paddle. He said, "I'm going to play." I said, "No, you're not. You're not waiting in line. You didn't wait your turn. You just give that paddle up because it's not your turn." He said, "No, I'm going to play." And I suddenly thought, I'm bigger than he is. I wasn't very much longer, but at that point I was bigger than he is. I'm stronger than he is. So I went over to him, I shoved him, I grabbed the paddle and said, "You're not playing." And I gave it to Mitch or Monty, whoever it was, and we started playing the game. Kevin ran off. Didn't think another thing about it until the door burst open. And my older brother, Ken, came into the room. Now, Ken was 3 years older than me. He was bigger than me. He was stronger than me. He came over and shoved me. And something about, "What do you think you're doing? Shoving your little brother and all this?" And he grabbed the paddle from me, and he gave it to Kevin, and he left the room. Oh. Well, I couldn't beat him up, but there was something I could do. So as he got to the door, I ran to the door, and I shoved him through. Now, we were on the second floor of this cabin down there, and right outside the door was a little landing, and then it went downstairs. So I was hoping to push him so that he'd tumble down the stairs. So I ran up there and I pushed him, but he didn't go very far. He ran into somebody who was standing on the landing. My dad. Now I'm thinking, okay, took it from Kevin. Kevin got Ken. Ken pushed me. I went back and pushed him. And so Ken has pushed my dad, so he's going to get in bad trouble. But that wasn't the case at all. My dad came in there, stormed over to where I was now standing, and took me and shoved me against the wall. He didn't beat me, or I could tell that story and we could have him arrested. But anyway, he shoved me against the wall. "What are you doing? I don't know what you're doing. We're going home." Going home. We're spending another night and then we're going home, Dad. What's the deal? But 15 minutes later, we were in the car. Our stuff was packed. And we're driving away. And the Baggetts and others are just standing there waving at us as we pull out. I learned something from this. I learned something. I needed to monitor my behavior. Just because I was bigger than Kevin for a short time, he grew to be a much bigger person than I was, became a great football player, and I never messed with him again. But I learned that just using your size doesn't work. We've been talking about guardrails. We're wrapping up today a series on guardrails. A guardrail is a system designed to help vehicles keep from straying into unwanted or dangerous areas. They're on bridges, overpasses, things like that. And they direct and protect the cars. I mean, if you run into them, it will damage the car a little bit, probably will not damage you much. And that's what they're there for. They're built in the safety zone, not in the danger zone, in the safety zone to keep you from going out and hurting yourself or hurting someone else. So, we have those because we know that we need them with cars. It's obvious that we need them with cars. But what we don't understand is that we need them in other areas of our lives. See, a guardrail basically is a commitment that we make that something's going to trigger in our brain before something bad really happens. In the safety zone, something's going to happen and we're going to go, uh-oh, I need to have this guardrail so I don't get out there and hurt somebody or hurt something, and that sort of thing. Guardrails. Today we're wrapping up this series. We've talked about guardrails for finances last week. We've talked about guardrails with others and those sort of things over the last several weeks, and they've been good. But today, we're going to talk about probably the most important thing that we need to deal with. Solomon was probably the wisest person who ever lived on the face of the planet. As a human being, he knew more than anybody else. God had blessed him with it. And he wrote tons of books and things like that. In the Bible that we have, he wrote most of the Proverbs. He also wrote the Song of Solomon, and he wrote Ecclesiastes. In Ecclesiastes, he tells us about life. He tells us what works, what doesn't work, what it is, and how to do things. His kingdom that he set up was the most organized, efficient kingdom in the history of the world. He was really a sharp guy. Now, if you're a Christian, you've probably read some of what he's done in the Old Testament, the Old Covenant. But if you're not a Christian, if you don't follow Jesus, maybe you don't know much about him. But he was an incredibly wise person. And he wrote one thing amongst all the others that was most important. And I want to look at that for just a minute today, because I think it's going to lead us into the area where we really need some guardrails. He said this: guard your hearts above all else. Above all else. I want you to look at that. Above all else. Now, what does that mean? Above all else. Means more important than anything else. Means more important than everything else. This is the number one thing. If you don't hear anything I say, if you don't hear anything that I've ever written, hear this. Do not miss this. Above all else, guard your heart. Guard your heart. Well, guard my heart? What do you mean, my heart? Who I am, what I really believe, what's going to lead me to do? Because he says it determines the course of your life. Everything you do comes from your heart. Everything, not your physical heart organ, but from who you are, from the inside, everything comes, and it determines whether your life is successful or whether there's conflict. 1,000 years later, Jesus walked the face of the earth, and he addressed this same issue in a different way. Now, let me set this up for you just a little bit. Jesus, when he was here, if you know about Jesus, you know this. If you don't know a lot about Jesus, you don't. But Jesus walked around, and he was incredibly popular. People, common people like you and I, loved him. They loved to follow him around. In fact, thousands would follow him, 5,000 to 10,000 everywhere he went were following Jesus to hear him teach and to receive his miracles and receive his food and those sort of things like that. So almost anywhere he was, there was a huge crowd of people. At the back of this crowd of people, you would always find the Pharisees, the teachers of the law. These were the religious leaders of the day. When I say religious leaders, in the Jewish culture, since religion was so important, they were the leaders. They were the people in charge of the Jewish culture. And so they would come and they would stand at the back of the crowd because they don't like Jesus. They don't like what he teaches. They don't like what he's doing. He's undermining everything that they're trying to do. But the people who are following Jesus, they don't like the Pharisees. They don't like the religious leaders because they put all sorts of burdens on them. They didn't care about them at all. And so they can't do anything, the Pharisees can't, because of the crowd of people that are following. So they stand at the back. But ever so often, every once in a while, they'd hear something that Jesus said. They'd talk amongst themselves. And then they'd go to the front, mingle to the front of the crowd to challenge him on what he said. This is going to be the thing. This will be the thing that will get him. This will turn the crowds against him. And the whole New Testament is about that. The Gospels are about that, which makes it very interesting. And so on this particular day, they go to the front. Some Pharisees and teachers of religious law now arrive from Jerusalem to see Jesus. They ask him, "Why do your disciples disobey our age-old tradition? For they ignore our tradition of ceremonial hand-washing before they eat." They said, "We got it. The disciples didn't do the ceremonial hand-washing before they ate." This is going to get the crowd. Everybody in Israel does this before every meal. See, here's the thing. They had set up this tradition of ceremonial hand-washing. It was something in the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, which was set up between God and people. God said, here are certain things that you should do, and here's how that you should behave, and here's what will happen as a result of it. And one of the things that he said to the priests were, you're dealing with the things that are important, my things. You need to make sure that your hands are always clean, that your hearts are clean. And he, as a symbol of it, he said, I want you to wash your hands in this way so that you will think about what you're doing. Well, the Pharisees, the teachers of religious law, said, well, that's a good deal. We'll just make a law, a tradition, that we'll just pass this on to the nation of Israel. And so they did. And it became a law coming from the Jewish leaders that everyone must ceremonially wash their hands in a certain way before they ate. Didn't really mean much, but it's what they set up. And the disciples have not done it. They ate food without washing their hands. Mothers who are in here today, you're going, I can't believe they do that. But anyway, they didn't do the ceremonial hand washing. And so they challenged Jesus on it. They ignored the tradition of ceremonial hand washing before they eat. And Jesus, who was very humored by this, replies. Now, Jesus does something really incredible here because Jesus asks them a question. Now, I have learned from wise people, I'm not one of those, and I don't do it very often, but I have learned from wise people, when somebody questions them, they always question right back. And the discussion goes forward. I'm one who responds, and that's not a good thing, but Jesus was incredibly wise. If you look throughout the New Testament, that's what he does all the time. Somebody asks him a question, he asks them a question. And here's the question that he asked. And why do you, Pharisees, teachers of the law, by your traditions violate the direct commandments of God? They're talking about ceremonial hand washing. They brought up the traditions. And Jesus is saying, okay, let's deal with this. Why do you take God's law, which is supreme, and make a tradition that overrides that law? He says, for instance, God says, honor your father and mother, and anyone who speaks disrespectfully of father or mother must be put to death. But you say, it's all right for people to say to their parents, sorry, I can't help you. For I vowed to give to God what I would have given to you. In this way, you say that they don't need to honor their parents. See, you don't understand what this is about. I didn't understand what this was about. But it was a tradition that the Jewish leaders had put into law. And the reason they did it was to benefit themselves. God had said, honor your father and mother. Treat them well all of their lives. Take care of them when they get older. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the Pharisees had come up with their own tradition. And they decided that if you pledged everything that you had to the temple, you couldn't give it away. But you could use it all for yourselves. Their families and they would be taken care of, and in fact, they would spend most every single thing they had. But when somebody would come to them and say, listen, can you help with this? I'm sorry, I can't give while I'm living. No giving while I'm living, because I have dedicated this to the temple, and I couldn't steal from God to give to you. Pretty clever. They had figured out a way to take everything that they had and keep everything that they had specifically for themselves. Jesus said, but you don't take care of your parents. And you teach others not to take care of their parents. In this way, you say that they don't need to honor their parents, and so you cancel the word of God for the sake of your own tradition. It's clever what you've done. But God has a rule that you're supposed to care at least for your parents. Now, you've set this up so that you don't have to give to anybody. When they come to you, no, I can't give. And you don't even give to your parents. Now, think about this for a minute. And see, we kind of miss this because we live in our day and time. In our day and time, you can go to the doctor. You can go to the optometrist. You can go to the dentist. You can go to all these people, and they really do prolong your lives. I mean, I can't see much. Far off, I can't see at all. So I wear a contact. And so I can see far off, and up close I can see. But without that, I wouldn't be able to see anything. If I were in the world that they were living in, which was you got up each day, you made enough to eat for that day, and then the next day you did the same thing again, I wouldn't have been able to survive very well because I didn't see very well. Or perhaps my knees go bad. Or perhaps my back goes out. Well, I can go to the doctor. They can work on me. My dad's like 86 now. Still functional, still doing things incredibly well. In these days, that didn't happen. Because as you got older, there was no one to take care of you. Carter says, you can't hear. Probably soon I'll get a hearing aid. I'm trying to struggle through that, but probably soon I will. But in those days, if you couldn't hear, you couldn't survive. And so the parents, they would come to their children and say, listen, can you help me? And the Pharisees have set up a rule. No, sorry, can't do it. I've pledged it to God. It's an amazing thing. Jesus says, you hypocrites. Now, when you say you hypocrites, I've said it before, those are fighting words. I mean, you're asking for an argument. But it wasn't the same with Jesus. When Jesus said, you hypocrites, that was the end of the conversation. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they slowly shuffled to the back because Jesus had gotten them again. The crowd is probably cheering. Yeah, way to go, Jesus, you got them. And on the way back, they're talking to one another and saying, I thought you said that was a good question. I thought we were going to get it. What's the deal here? They make their way to the back. But Jesus doesn't let it go. Let's go to the next verse. Then Jesus called the crowd and said, hey, come here. Listen, I want you to learn something from what I've just said. Try to understand. It's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you. You're defiled by the words that come out of your mouth. Now he's talking about the way the Jewish culture was set up. There are traditions you had to do. You had to wash your hands. You had to eat this food. And if you didn't eat it the right way and you didn't wash your hands, it defiled you and you were no longer worthy. And Jesus said, here, I want you to understand something. That's the way you're living, but it's not right today. That was the old covenant, which I've come and I've completed, and I'm bringing something brand new to you. And in my covenant, that means nothing. Let me relate it to us today. Religious tradition is what we count on to get us right with God. If we go to church. When I was a little boy, every Saturday night, I read my Sunday school lesson. I polished my shoes. I took my Bible to church the next day. I showed up on time. I stayed for worship. I put the 5 things down. I mean, I'm a great Christian. I mean, I was as good as they get because I was there and I had done those things. And Jesus says, your religious traditions are no good. Wait, you mean, but I go to church because God and I'm trying to see if I'm okay with God. And so I do all those things. Jesus says that's not the deal. That's not how God functions in the new covenant. In the new covenant, God says you relate to me by how you treat the people around you. I mean, this is novel. Not only is it novel, it is earth-shattering because it is totally against everything that everybody has grown up with. Well, you mean my traditions, the things that I do, they don't help me relate to God? Jesus says, no, not at all. Hey, I'm going to church, no, those things don't relate to God at all. Because during the week, you can do whatever you want to do, and then you think you show up on Sunday or you go to confessional and everything is okay now. He said, God wants to have a relationship with you. And here's the check. If you have a relationship with God, your relationship with other people will be good. Woo! That hits me. I mean, I was growing up all these years as a good Christian boy, and I would do all the right things on Sunday, but during the week, I might have some trouble. I might get into it with somebody. I might be talking about somebody. And God says, I don't think you know me. Because if you know me, you know that I created everyone. It isn't just you, it's everyone. And if you know that I created everyone, you know that I love everyone. And so here's what I want from you. I want you to get along with everyone. I want you to care for everyone. I want you to understand that it's others first in this world. When I think about that, it really makes me pause. Go on to the next. Jesus then calls his disciples around. He says, do you understand? Do you get what I'm saying? Peter's going, well, I understand. The rest of them, they don't understand, but kind of explain it to us. And Jesus says, listen, it's not about this. It's not about traditions anymore. It's about loving God and loving people. And so today, as we talk about the heart, as we talk about what comes out of the heart, there are 4 areas that we really want to deal with today. 4 areas that come out of who we are that affect the people around us. And I'm trying to focus you and trying to focus me on the people around us because that's the deal. That's what God's looking at. No matter what we say, so many people in America today go to church. They do the right things on Sunday, and the rest of the week, they don't. That's been me for a lot of time. And God says, that's not what I want. So this morning, we're going to talk about guardrails for the heart. 4 things that we have, 4 things that affect us, that then affect other people, that come from us. Because everything that comes out of us is what defiles us. It's what we do to others that defiles us. And Jesus said it. So the first one is guilt. Guilt. We all feel guilt. We've done something, we've taken something, and for the rest of our lives, we harbor that inside of us because we did that. It's basically saying, I owe you. I'm guilty because I took something from you. I'm guilty because I said something about you. I'm guilty because I did something that diminished you in some way. Guilt. The second one is anger. Anger. All of us can deal with this emotion. Some of us deal with it out loud, being loud and yelling at people. Others of us harbor it inside. But the amazing thing about anger is it says, you owe me. You took something from me. You said something about me. You did something to me or my family. You owe me. And the amazing thing about anger is it doesn't just stay in this one situation. When you get angry, your anger seeps out into other situations. That's why so many people in America are married and divorced, married and divorced, married and divorced. Because in the first marriage, somebody does something that really angers you, that really hurts you. And we keep the anger. And we take it with us. We take it into every relationship around us. All the people who are around us, if you see them on a certain day, you know not to mess with them. There's something wrong there. And then they take it into the next relationship, and they're just looking. They're looking to see if you're going to do the same thing that last person did. And when you do, they go, "Ha, I knew it." Anger seeps over, and it builds, and it builds, and it says, "You owe me." The third one is greed. We talked about greed last week. Greed is basically saying, everything I get is mine. All the money that I can get, all the things that I can get, all the things that I store, this is all mine. And it's for me. It's not for anybody else. Wasn't Jesus' plan. He said it's an others first world, but we take things. Well, there may be something that we bought that is so important to us. We set it up on a shelf, or we take it and we polish it and we take care of it. There's nothing wrong with having things. Jesus doesn't say that. But we set it aside and it's ours. Greed. And our greed affects other people. When they come and talk to us and they say, "Hey, I've got this thing I'd like for you to give to it, if you would." And we go, "Oh man, that moves my heart. That is really sad what's going on there. Doesn't move my wallet, but it moves my heart. I really can feel what you're saying, but this money is mine. And I owe me. And I can't give away what I owe to myself, so I appreciate what you're saying, but I just can't give to it." And the fourth one is jealousy. It could be romantic jealousy, but normally it's not. Normally it's somebody else in your business got the job that you were in line for. Somebody else got the award or got the reward that you thought was yours. And it upset you. And truthfully, when you talk about jealousy, what it says is that life owes me. I've lived by the rules. I've done the right things. And look, that person who got it, they didn't deserve that. They should be punished for what they did, and instead they got the big stuff and I got nothing. Realistically, what we're saying, though, is when we're jealous, we're saying, not does life doesn't owe me. God, you owe me. You're over everything, and you can see how things are going, and you know that they haven't done the right things, and they still got the job. You have cheated me. These four things control our lives. Hopefully, as I've said this, it touched you, because it did me as I'm going over it this week. And the thing is, what kind of guardrails do we need to build so that before we get into it, before we act on it, we can correct it, we can monitor our behavior, and we can keep within the guidelines? Well, if you're guilty, the one thing that will free us from guilt, the one thing that will absolutely do away with guilt, is confess. See, we don't want to confess. We did something wrong. We don't want to tell about what we did wrong. We don't want to own up to it. But maybe we did something wrong as kids, or maybe we did something wrong at a certain age, or maybe we did something wrong last year, and we don't want to tell anybody about it, especially not our spouse. What's the matter? Nothing? Nothing's the matter. And that's what we do. But if we want to be freed from it, God says, you need to confess it. Well, but that'll cause some problems. Minor problems. If you confess something that you did recently, there are going to be some minor things that are going to happen. You and your wife may have some struggles. You and others may have some struggles. But you've confessed it, and eventually that will go away, and you can move down the path. Minor damage. That's what guardrails are for, to take you to minor damage. But if you let it build, if you let it go, and you never confess it, they'll eventually find out. And when they find out, there is hell to pay. God says, confess it. Greed. Greed says, I owe me. It's all mine. What do you do to get past greed? This one gets me. And I'm not greedy in the world's sense of greed. I give to others. I do certain sorts of things. But what do you do if you're greedy? If there's a need that you really should give to, and you think about it, you say, now, this is mine. I won't have enough left if I do this. Very simple. Give. Write a big check. Now, what's a big check? A big check is whatever's big to you. There are millionaires that a big check, they could give away hundreds of thousands of dollars would mean nothing. What's a big check to them? What's a big check to you? Write a big check. Is there a charity that needs some money? Is there somebody else that needs help? Do you give for a ministry? Write a check. And as you do that, greed slips away. Because it doesn't have anything to do with you, because you're going to give your money away. You're going to give it to others the way God said, and it no longer controls you. Some of us have that object. Some of us have that car. Some of us have something. Nothing wrong with having any of those things unless it owns us. You know what we can do? Sell it. Oh, but I've collected it. But it's mine, but it's sitting there and it does you no good. Sell it. And then here's the bottom line. This will scare the dog out of you. Give the money from it to something else where it can do some good. It will free us. We will no longer be controlled by greed. And an amazing thing happens. When you give to others, your heart changes. Carter and I have gone through this so many times. She says, I think we should give to this. And I go, can we afford it? The question isn't, can we afford it? The question is, did God say do it? And if God said do it, he said, I'll take care of you for it. Give to overcome greed. And jealousy. What can we do when others have benefited? When we haven't gotten what we want, what we think that we deserve? One word. Celebrate. Celebrate? Yeah, celebrate. So, suppose somebody gets the job that you thought you deserved, that you really wanted. Write them a letter. I'm so excited that you got this job. I know that you'll do a great job with it. Well, what about me? Celebrate for them. Celebrate for people around you. See, Jesus said it's an other-centered world. It's not about us, it's about others. What do you do for others that will release you to be who you can be? These things, these guidelines, will help us to find out what God wants for us. See, here's the deal. There's some people here today that maybe know Jesus, some people that don't know Jesus. If you're not a follower of Jesus, these are great suggestions. I can't tell you you have to do them, but they're great suggestions that will make your life better and make you better at life. Now, if you're a follower of Jesus, there's no option here. Jesus said, follow me, this is the way I live. We're commanded to do it. But it makes our lives better and makes us better at our life. And it brings something into us that nothing else does. A joy. We enjoy each and every day, each and every moment, if we open our hands to receive what God has for us. We're trying to get it through all these other areas that will take us nowhere but destruction. And think about it. Have any of them ever really made you happy? No. And God says, receive what I have. Be others-centered. Give to those around you. Brings up an important point. How's your heart? How is your heart? Has anybody offended you this week? Anybody done something to you that shouldn't have done? Has somebody made you angry this week? Have you taken something from somebody or said something about somebody that makes you feel guilty? Has somebody gotten something that you thought you should get and you're jealous? We need to take our heart and use these to monitor our behavior. Because if we monitor our behavior, we can get on God's side of things, and then life becomes so much better. How do you want your life? Let's pray. Father, I thank you for your word. I thank you for its truth. And Lord, I hope that I've communicated in a way that people can relate to it and begin to do something with it. It's your words and it's your truth. And Lord, I pray that you'll bring it to pass. It's in Jesus' name. Amen. Before you go, check your heart out. This week, monitor your heart. Monitor these areas. And do the one thing that God asked us to do. And see if it doesn't make your life so much better. Have a great week. We're glad